Hey guys, how's it going? My name's Josh. I'm the owner and founder of the Bioactive. If this is your first time visiting my channel, welcome. For those of you that have watched my videos before, thank you for clicking and stopping in to say hi. I actually have a 4x2x2 in front of me with my pair of corn snakes in here. And you guys, I've gotten a lot of questions. Why do you keep your corn snakes together? They've been around together for, honestly, since Bioactive's been in business. But today, I'm actually going to separate them out and give Nagini her own 4x2x2 habitat. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk about some of the most common mistakes that I've made, and I'm going to show you guys some ways around those mistakes, so that way you can have a very successful long-term bioactive terrarium. And I'm going to do that while I am putting together this awesome corn snake habitat. So here we go, let's get started. This is terra firma. You guys are all familiar with that substrate. The whole point of bio is having your habitat last a really long time, right? You want it to last the life of the animal, so you're not constantly replacing substrate. But to keep that substrate healthy, it takes some work. It takes keeping your cleanup crew healthy, your soil healthy long-term, because as those cleanup crew and those root systems suck out the nutrients, they're not being put back in there on the large scale that they're being pulled. So it's kind of up to us to make sure that we are maintaining that cycle as your terrarium progresses. So, you know what? Let's get going here. So I'm gonna get this put up here. Very nice. So one of the most common first mistakes that people make, if you're running a tropical setup, you don't use a drainage layer. Your setup will fail every single time. The other aspect that people commonly make mistakes for is not using enough substrate. When it comes to your boreal species, you know, snakes, some frogs, you want to make sure that there is enough substance in that substrate to be able to withstand the tunnels and burrows that they're going to make. So a good rule of thumb is if you put 4 inches of substrate within 30 days, that 4 inches depth is going to turn into 3 inches. If you go 6 inches, it's going to turn into about 5 inches. It usually loses about 20% of its height after it starts to compact and get settled. To have a successful substrate, it needs to aerate top to bottom, right, to prevent bad bacterial pockets. So the general rule of thumb is when if you're doing your own DIY mix or you're not using a drainage layer, besides the substrate aerating point A to point B, you need to have a minimum of 4 inches of substrate at the very least to be able to facilitate enough surface area for your bugs, surface area for your roots, as well as adequate space for your animals to create their burrows and their tunnels as if they would in the wild. So if you get a bag of soil, bioactive soil, and you're trying to have a 1.5 to 2 inch layer that you can see right here, this is maybe 2 inches. This is 136 quart. This is 1.5 36 quart bags of Firma in here. It ain't gonna work. You won't be able to get your moisture levels set up correctly, and it's just going to make your life a lot harder. So rule number 1 of this terrarium tips video, use enough dirt. I got a bucket of water. It's actually warm water. Got my sphagnum moss. So we're gonna put that in there and let that soak for a couple minutes. The next step, look at all your biodegradables. So if you guys know, you buy my Colombian leaf litter, it's already baked, it's already boiled. This is good to go out of the box, meaning out of this bag. You can take it right out of this bag and put it in your terrarium. If you are buying leaves from anybody, including me, even though I say pre-rinsed and hard-boiled, I still highly recommend that you follow these steps. 5-gallon bucket, leaf litter. Okay, so you guys see I got all my leaves in this 5-gallon bucket. What I'm going to do is I'm going to fill these leaves with water. And I'm going to let them soak for a good 10 to 15 minutes, and then I'm going to rinse them off. If you do not know where you got your leaf litter from, I highly recommend you boil it, because once you put anything in your habitat, if it had any pesticides, herbicides, guano-based fertilizers, any of those things, they will permanently be in your habitat, which you do not want. So let's get this filled up with water. Okay, guys, so one of the next tips that I have is something that's really commonly overlooked. Your bioactive substrate, whether you get it from me, whether you get it from a competitor, whether you make it yourself, the dirt is inert. That's how I like to remember it. There is nothing in here. And able to get the majority of the ingredients into the United States, it is pasteurized, which means it is cooked for an extremely long time at a very, very high temperature, which means a lot of your positive bacteria and a lot of your other things that you need in here are not present. So when you put your live plants in this substrate and things like that, they are reaching really far to try to get some nutrition. That's why we have the BioShot. The BioShot is, to me, one of the most important aspects of long-term care of your soil to get it started. Because not only does it have the different strains of mycorrhizae in here, it also provides an insect-based fertilizer that is not poop-based, which is very important to be able to give your plants that little leg up that they need so that way they can properly root in your soil. Plants have a much higher death rate if you just put them in the inert substrate. So one of the biggest mistakes I see people make is they'll use some of their, of the other substrates or make their own, and they won't put any type of soil additive in there to reinforce the processes that need to happen to actually create your bioactive environment. Because you can put in your springtails and isopods all day long, but they're only going to provide so much. They're only going to create so much nitrogen in the back end. They're only going to do so much as far as after breaking down the organic waste, which, by the way, it's going to take some time for your organic waste to even be broken down anyway, or to even become established. So getting these things put in here is very, very important. So long story short, do not forget your BioShot, or if you find another soil inoculant that's going to work for you, just make sure you use it. It's just really important that you are paying attention to the composition. You never want bat guano or chicken guano. If it has that in the ingredients, you cannot use it. You cannot use it. It will cause sickness to your critter. And now let me go into the next tip, because a lot of people like to make this mistake. So what they'll do, you can see that the spag moss has expanded here. You can see the amount that you get from a brick. You get a third of a 5-gallon bucket. I'm all about value. So one of the things that you do not want to do, so you see how this is like dripping? Do not put it into your tank like this. Your spag moss needs to be like so. Wet, but not really dripping. So what a lot of people like to do, they like to put the sphagnum moss to directly cover the top layer of your substrate and not mix it together. This does not work for multiple reasons. Reason number one, you need your substrate to aerate very top to very bottom. Air has to touch the very bottom. If you are just going to pile a whole bunch of spag on top here, that really limits airflow. Airflow gets limited, bad bacteria outcompetes the good bacteria. You start getting bad bacterial pockets, which builds up methane and other things. This also can cause a problem with humidity. This can really, really heighten your humidity in different areas of the terrarium, making it very, very, very hard for you to actually manage it. So it's really important that when you're doing your spag moss, you don't do this. I don't care if it's a dart frog, you don't want to do anything like that. What I recommend is you're going to take it, and you obviously know where your centralized humid areas are going to be, because I'm going to put a little bit in where the humid cave's going to be, and I'm just going to lightly spread it around on the top. After I have my spag moss placed, my leaves, they've been soaking for about 20 minutes. Look at this. And I know this is good stuff. So what's really nice about the banana leaves is they're super, super fibrous, and you get the same type of benefit from my palm bark, which is palm leaves. Now, what this is going to do when it gets wet and gets somewhat waterlogged, this becomes a microbial hotspot in your soil, which means the mycorrhizae from your BioShot, as well as the symbiotic relationships with the mycorrhizae that are filmed on that are attached to plant roots, are going to spread over to these little hotspots to create little bacteria zones that put nutrition in your water, as well as your cleanup crew. Love this stuff because it's super, super fibrous. Now, in our Bioactive kits, we always include either the palm bark or the banana leaves. It really depends on what we have in stock, because I import all of this from out of the country. And again, if you did not buy these leaves, or you're using live oak leaf litter or magnolia leaf litter, you boil these leaves before you use them. Always, always, always. So what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna take some of this, and you wanna get it so that way it can drip a little bit, but nothing too crazy. And you notice how I'm just putting the leaves kind of all over the place here, centralizing them under the heat lamp, as well as other places. And what's really nice is look how malleable it is when it gets nice and soft, which also makes it really nice for being able to shred them when needed. Okay. I can tell you guys, the springtails and isopods absolutely love this stuff. And then here we have a whole bunch of leaf litter. You want to know how I know this is good stuff? Look at the color of the water, folks. That's good stuff. And when you guys get leaves that haven't gone through the boiling process already, you haven't cleaned them already, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. Because you'll see what color that water turns. Which is partially from tannins, and also partially from just from the dirt and all the stuff that actually gets on the leaves. So another common mistake that people make is not mixing your biodegradables into your dirt. Guys, if you only leave the biodegradables on the very top, they are not going to do much for you with the long-term success of your habitat. Not only will once the biodegradables are successfully mixed together, not only will they make sure that we have different air pockets scattered throughout the substrate, they will also become little microbial hotspots, exactly like the banana leaves that I told you guys about earlier. So I'm really happy with the amount of biodegradables that I have in here. You can see that the spag moss isn't mixed up yet. The leaf litter isn't mixed up yet, and the BioShot is in here. So the next thing that I'm going to do is start mixing everything together. Okay, mixing all this stuff up here. Thoroughly mixing your substrate, guys, is hands down to me honestly one of the most important aspects of having a bioactive habitat. Because your isopods, your springtails, they need a whole lot of detritus matter, especially when you're having the isopods for corn snakes and other colubrids, because of the amount of waste that they create. You need isopods that need a lot of matter to be able to sustain them and their populations to maintain your actual bioactive habitat. And then once I know that the BioShot is thoroughly mixed in, the leaf litter is thoroughly mixed in, I know that I'm going to have a multitude of different layers throughout the substrate itself. I can say that I'm happy mixing, that I'm happy with my mixture. You can see that the moss is not left on the very top, and that it just looks like a forest floor. You can see some leaves sticking out of the substrate, some leaves are not sticking out of the substrate, and everything seems to have its own little layer to it, which is exactly what we want, guys. Okay. A lot of people ask me, Josh, how do I know how much moisture to actually put into my substrate? What I don't recommend is dumping a whole bunch of water in your bag and then dumping that in here. I don't recommend that. What I recommend is first get your substrate, your drainage layer, if required, into the actual habitat. Get your BioShot mixed in, get your biodegradables mixed in, and then just put your hand in and feel everything. If you feel like the bottom layer is really dry, or there isn't a definitive layer of moisture, throughout all of the habitat, that after you've mixed in the spag and mixed in everything, that's when you can take those extra steps and give it a nice misting, which is exactly what I'm gonna do. And I just go right like this. This is a commercial sprayer from Home Depot that they use for pesticide, which is just great. And then what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna be monitoring the temperature and the humidity extremely closely, because it's gonna get pretty humid in here for the snake and I don't want them to feel it too much. Okay. All right, that's not too bad. So after I see that, I'm gonna put my finger in here. Yeah, I can already tell that that is a lot better than what it was before. So that should do the trick for me when it comes to actually getting everything gone. Now, I know that my snake is gonna be basking. I know that my snake is gonna be making a ton of tunnels and burrows. So another mistake that people commonly make is designing the tank for you, not for your animal. It is always the other way around. You should design your entire habitat around the needs of your animal. Whether if it's a burrowing animal, you better make sure you have a lot of substrate in there and a lot of areas for them to create dens. If it's a basking reptile, you better make sure there are plenty of areas to climb, plenty of areas to bask. If it's an arboreal reptile, you better make sure there's some height to it. I can go on and on. But before you even start building, look at the needs of the animal, look at the needs of your isopods that you're putting in there, and make sure that you are designing an ecosystem that will fluently support all of those inhabitants. Because if the isopods don't survive, the springtails don't survive, your bioactive habitat's not going to survive. So I know that this is going to be her basking side, and Nagini sure loves to bask. So I'm going to get my hardscape in. Okay, there we go. So that is area number 1. For the plant there. Okay guys, so now that my hardscape is in, got the Bioactive bowl, her big water bowl right there. Next I'm gonna start doing plants. So you guys know we sell a lot of plants. So I already know what plants I'm gonna be using. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and likely 6. So the next thing we gotta do is we gotta work on de-dirting them and getting them in the sink. So let me show you guys. So the first thing is first, I got a really nice aglaonema here. So the one thing you can tell what's nice about these plants is their root systems. Pretty strong, but what I like to do is just put my hand at the bottom and give it a nice shake. And then what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna put it right back in the pot, right like this. On the next one, and I'm gonna do this for every single plant. Now guys, you've seen some videos I haven't done this because I didn't show the step. But this is a terrarium tips video and setting you guys up. Do not buy plants from anybody, including me, and take them out of the pot and just throw them in your tank. Don't ever do it. I don't care if they claim that they're pesticide free or herbicide free. There is runoff, there is misting systems within these greenhouses that can sometimes carry those chemicals from one section to another. You have insects that can carry it on their bodies and go from one plant to another. It is really easy to be able to contaminate this, and sometimes the dirt will also have ingredients that quite frankly you don't want in your habitat. Ingredients like perlite, for the risk of accidentally ingesting them. Sometimes you can get little balls of fertilizer. which if I'm not mistaken, the only plant we sell that actually has those little balls of fertilizer in it is the elephant feed. Which again, we say on the website, you need to take these steps. So now that they're all de-dirted, now it's time to go rinse them off. Here's a good idea of what we want. Okay, roots are as cleaned off as possible. The plant itself has been cleaned off as much as possible. This also, you know, fully reinforces what I was talking about before, right? And that's with making sure we give your plants some healthy nutrition when they are put into this habitat. Fern right here. So I got some really nice lush green moss here. First, I'm gonna take a small piece and I'm actually gonna go like this. I'm gonna take some of the moss. It is wet and dripping. And I'm just gonna spread it on top of here like this to help create a little bit of moisture retention underneath. And I'm gonna put that there. Then I got this piece of moss. Got this. I'm gonna put right here. So with this moss, guys, it's gonna grow up and it will spread. It just takes time, guys. Moss is very slow. Moss doesn't like competition. If you guys want an in-depth guide on moss, drop a line on the comments of this video, and I'll see what I can do. Okay, so we got our moss in. Okay. Now, we know that we have all of our biodegradables mixed in. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take the little bit left biodegradables that we do have, which is just a couple of leaves and some other stuff, and I'm just going to lay them right on the top like this to provide, yet again, a little bit more surface cover without drowning out my substrate. And I'm putting it everywhere. By the leaves, by the root systems of these big plants, behind the cork, in front of the cork. Oh, man, okay. So that's another big tip, guys, I have for y'all that makes your lives a lot easier. Okay, guys, so the last terrarium tip I have for you. The general rule of thumb is for every 36 quarts of substrate you're using, you need at least 40 to 50 isopods per species. So if you have a top dwelling isopod, such as a powder orange or powder blue, then you have a substrate dwelling isopod, such as a dwarf purple or dwarf white. You want to make sure that you have more than enough per quart of substrate. So here's a good example. There's a whole bunch of, there is a significant amount of babies in here. I really wish I could get a better shot. There is about 100, with the adults, I counted close to 100 in there compared to all the other babies I had, plus some tropical pink springtails. What I'm going to do is simply put this little container, or put that little piece right there, and dump them in. So I just seeded a little over 100 isopods with 3 36-quart bags of dirt. When you have a lot of substrate in here, that's more surface area. That means it's a lot harder for these critters to find each other. So you want to make sure that not only do you have enough fuel in here, which is your biodegradables, you also have enough isopods to seed the habitat that will actually be enough for them to produce and find each other. Again, if you have a big habitat like this and you're only buying 20 isopods, it's not enough, guys. The more isopods you seed, the better off you're going to be. For a habitat this size, we'd recommend a minimum of 3 springtail cultures. Now, we culture ours on charcoal, as you can see right here. And these will last forever. So all we do, we take culture number 1, sprinkle. You notice how there's some a little bit left over? We're gonna put the lid on and check on it in a couple weeks, and then we can use it to continually reseed. Number 2. Okay, that goes right in here. And then you can see this one right here. There's a whole bunch of tropical pinks in there, except I'm gonna go right here. See a whole bunch of them fall out, and you can still see a good amount left on the charcoal. We seal them up, we mist them, and we just let this sit with some food a couple weeks. In a couple weeks, when we open these up, we can put the same amount of springtails back in here. The general rule of thumb, when you have a tank this big, that you are generally reseeding with springtails every couple months. And the reason that is because you never have enough springtails. They will continually breed, they will continue to reproduce. You can also follow this logic with isopods as well. What I'm getting at is, don't let the kits on the internet, one springtail culture, one isopod culture, do a 4x2x2, think it's gonna work. You will fail. Your bioactive habitat will fail. Instead, you take that one culture of springtails, one culture of isopods, culture them yourself. Let those populations build up within your culturing habitat, and then use that culturing habitat to seed your tank, which is exactly what we did here. I also want you to remember with the isopods, their whole evolutionary niche is to hide. Whether it's smaller species that tend to stay in the soil, or whether it's your top species, they really don't want to be found, right? So the biggest killer of isopods is letting your tank completely dry out. And when I say you let your tank dry out, it's you let your substrate completely dry out. So we know if you're having a tropical setup, the soil should never be wet to the point when it's dripping, but wet enough so that way it's damp. Same thing goes with your temperate and desert setups. Dry on the top layer, moist in the middle and bottom. That's always how you want it. So that middle and bottom moisture layer is the most important and integral part to not only your plant health, but your isopod and springtail health too. And as you're keeping your isopods, you also need to understand their care. Are they dairy cows? Do they need to be supplemented with calcium bones? If so, you need to put the calcium carbonate bones in your habitat. Or are they a more less voracious species, such as the dwarf whites? Meaning you need to have a lot of microbial hotspots within the soil, i.e. those biodegradables we mixed in. So it isn't only about understanding the care of your habitat, it's understanding the care of the isopods in there as well, because they are just as much of a backbone into this ecosystem that you're creating as your springtails, as your inhabitant, because they all work together in the same cycle. Your inhabitant creates the waste. Your detrivores break down that waste and turn it into nitrogen. Your plants take and other byproducts. Your then plants work with the symbiotic relationships on their plant roots to create more nutrition for your soil. So it just keeps going over and over and over again. And that is a really good way to make sure that your isopod colonies stay healthy and making sure that you give them the chance to success. It isn't just as simple as dumping them in your dirt and letting them go. There is a little bit of research that needs to go with it. And of course, if you're not sure, reach out to us. We'd be happy to answer any questions that you might have. Guys, this was another edition of Terrarium Tips. If there's anything that I missed, or if there's anything that you would like me to centralize on, please drop a line in this in the comment, and we can try to add it to our video log. I really appreciate everybody's support. Thank you for checking in on the channel. It's been a lot of fun. My name's Josh Halter. I'm the owner and founder of BioDude. Appreciate everybody's support. Dude abides.